Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Pro and HD video blog for Monday, the 13th of July, 2015. Let's take a look at what's going on in the tropics, beginning with the sea surface temperature anomalies. I think you can clearly see we have this El Nino that has developed in the tropical equatorial Pacific, that abnormal warming of the water here, and that extends northward, not necessarily the El Nino, but just this warm Pacific pattern here in the eastern Pacific and the North Pacific. Very interesting. Probably going to see several more strong hurricanes in this region throughout the remainder of the East Pacific hurricane season, which has quite a ways to go. And we do have Dolores sitting out here, which is a tropical storm, and Enrique out here somewhere, which is a non-event kind of a system. But it just goes to show, looking at this map, how warm the Pacific is, especially compared to the Atlantic basin here, where we have this cold area in the deep tropics here. It's warmed up a little bit off the west coast of Africa for several hundred miles westward, but the warmest water is up here in the subtropics. That means it's outside of the deep tropical development region, and as such, we had a complex of thunderstorms that moved off the Carolina coast this weekend, and now it has become Tropical Storm Claudette, sitting right over that warm water anomaly area in the northwest Atlantic, which is very common during an El Nino year for us to have these non-tropical sort of frontal-based developments. Looking at the El Nino from another perspective, this is the subsurface map, and you can clearly see the very warm water extending from the surface here to several hundred meters deep, and very, very warm, several degrees Celsius above the long-term average, and this just continues to strengthen and solidify itself in the Pacific. Looking at actual temperatures, for those of you that are headed to the beach, very warm along the Carolinas down towards Florida along the coastline, low to mid 80s in some areas, and then very, very warm and even above the normal here out in the open Atlantic, the Sargasso Sea, the area around Bermuda. And this is where Tropical Storm Claudette is located, somewhere out in this region over very warm water temperatures, 80, 81, 82 degrees. In the Gulf of Mexico, very warm here as well. We're talking 88, 89 degrees off the coast of Florida, upper 80s to the very low 90s in this orange shading here against the Louisiana coastline. That very shallow shelf water that's quite easy to warm up with abundant sunshine and light winds. It's easy to do that. So the water temperatures are definitely where they should be in terms of developing tropical cyclones, and in some cases the water temps are above that threshold by quite a bit. But we don't have any deep tropical waves or anything like that coming along to tap into it. This is a great map that shows sort of the perspective. This is now Claudette, no longer 92L. There's Dolores off the coast of the Pacific, and then here is Enrique sitting out in the open Pacific, the coast of Mexico, I should have said Pacific Mexico. Enrique out in the middle of nowhere, really, so it's not going to be a problem. This is the track map for Claudette. More of an interest and concern, but even that's not going to be too big of a deal. In the Canadian Maritimes over the next several days, the water temperatures up in this region begin to cool off dramatically, so Claudette will lose its tropical characteristics. It'll spread out its wind field and be a big windy rainmaker. I say big, it'll be big enough, but not certainly as large as some of these big hurricanes that come out of the deep tropics that make that transition could be. But nevertheless, this will be something for folks to watch up in Atlantic Canada. This is a shot showing Claudette here, satellite animation. There's Bermuda, and the Cape Cod is sitting right up here somewhere. So it's comfortably between the two areas, and this won't even generate much of a swell of any noticeability for the coastline. Maybe just a little bit of an increase since the winds are at 50 miles per hour. Looking in the Pacific, here is Dolores off the coast of Mexico. Tropical storm watches stay up in this area because it is close enough to possibly bring tropical storm conditions. And then here is Enrique struggling over to the west of Dolores. Water temperatures here warm, but it's just having an issue developing. You can clearly see it's got decent bands, but it's got a lot of dry air probably. Water temperatures, even though they're above normal up here to the north, they're still rather cool, so it might be ingesting some of that cooler, more stable air mass from the colder water temperatures to the north into itself. And there's the track map for Dolores. Good news, it's going to move away from the Mexican coastline, so if you have plans to travel to the Pacific Mexico area, no problems at all. There's nothing else developing sort of downstream, if you will, to worry about. So if you're going to Acapulco or Mazatlan or La Paz here, Cabo San Lucas, no problems from Dolores, other than, hey, there's some thunder outside my office, other than an increase in surf along the immediate coast. What does the future hold? Well, this is the MJO current position right here heading into phase 8, and then it kind of dies off a little bit, this according to the GFS, and then it looks like it tries to amplify into phases 1 and 2, which could favor Atlantic basin development, maybe some more convective activity or tropical wave generation over Africa with time. We'll have to see. The Euro, not quite as enthusiastic about the amplification into phases 1 and 2. As you can see, just very weak amplification into phase 2 in the next couple of weeks. And what this means basically, the MJO is this period of upward motion in the tropics, and you can see it really spiked here in the western Pacific, and that helped to set off all those typhoons and hurricanes now in the eastern Pacific, soon will be with Dolores probably. The MJO just provides this really fertile period in the atmosphere where tropical convection can grow and flourish and not be sheared off in any particular direction by high upper level winds. And when you see it amplify like it did here significantly in the western Pacific, you typically see a burst of tropical cyclone activity. So even though this is weak amplification, it's worth watching nonetheless in the Atlantic basin over the next couple of weeks, and we'll see if maybe a couple of more systems try to develop. If they do, they're probably going to be close to the United States coastline, either moving away or maybe something in the northeast Gulf. We'll have to watch. In this kind of a pattern, you can get something like that, small, non-tropical in origin, and fairly quick to develop. So we'll see what happens. All right, well, that's it from me for today. I'll be back tomorrow with another update on Claudette and Dolores. Until then, have a good rest of your Monday. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com and, of course, Hurricane Pro in HD. We'll talk again tomorrow.